from here support.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this session co-convened between Arup and the World Green Building Council, exploring how cross-sectoral partnerships can be used to create a circular water future. I'm Kirsten from Arup, and I'm going to pass to my colleague Dom, who works for the World Green Building Council.
Thank you, Kirsten. Welcome, everybody. My name is Dominika Czerwinska. I'm the Director of Engagement and Implementation at the World Green Building Council, and really happy to be co-hosting this session today with Arup, who are a really close partner of our network. Obviously, cross-sectoral partnerships are a really big part of what we do at World GBC, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is a really important conversation that we're having today. So thank you for everybody for joining us.
We've got some great speakers lined up today. So we're going to be exploring bringing the water and the energy sector together, bringing the water and the carbon sector together, and also how partnership bodies like the World Green Building Council can be used to bring all kinds of sectors together and focus on circularity in our built environment. So I think what we'll do is we'll pass straight to Braulio from the World Economic Forum, who's going to give our opening remarks today.
Thank you very much. My name is Braulio Eduardo Moreira. I'm the head of Resilience Solutions at the Center for Nature and Climate at the World Economic Forum. And I'm delighted to open this session with some remarks. Of course, thank you for inviting the World Economic Forum, which is the international organization for public-private cooperation. We're delighted to participate in this dialogue and, of course, to continue supporting the dialogue as the work moves forwards. So using the privileged role that involves in providing opening remarks and considering the title of this session, which is Cross-sectoral Partnerships Towards a Circular Water Future, I would like to suggest 3 ideas for the consideration of the panel and also, of course, of the audience. So first of all, the first idea, the first concept I would like to share with you is about the systemic perspective that is required in all this work. Because when we think about specific solutions, we believe that it's helpful to think about a systems perspective because their impact can be amplified. One example is that in 2001, the 50-liter home coalition, which is supported by the World Economic Forum and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, explored opportunities to integrate water reuse in domestic as well as water utility systems. And what they found whilst consulting with partners, of course, supported by the knowledge partners Arup, they found that actually water reuse solutions means different things to different people. And that meaning is associated with the solution they are most familiar with. What is the challenge that this creates? This creates a challenge because ultimately, when we talk about water reuse solutions, for example, which is a key for creating circularity in water, actually, we might be thinking about a specific solution, and we might not be thinking about the broad menu of options and opportunities that exist out there when we think about the whole water value chain. More recently, in a collaboration between Arup and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, those partners found that water is the second source of operational carbon emissions in European residential buildings. But what is interesting is that when we trace and explore the solutions that exist out there for green buildings, we can realize that actually most of the solutions, most of the action is focused on only energy. So if we don't think about the third source of carbon emission, the second source and the fourth, we might be missing opportunities to reduce, of course, that carbon footprint, but at the same time, we're missing opportunities to reduce water use and increase water efficiency in our cities. So integration and systemic perspective, we believe, is an opportunity to amplify the impact of our solution. A second perspective, a second idea that I wanted to share with you is about the importance of scaling up. we're still in a sustainability movement that is dominated by pilots. And wonderful ideas emerge from pilots, but unless we design ideas that are replicable and can be adopted by others, we are not moving the needle. And the key question we need to ask ourselves is how our ideas can be attractive to others, not only just a proof of concept of our own ideas. How can they be attractive to others? And also, very importantly, we believe that bringing a robust business case that is replicable, that is understandable by others, is something that can help for the adoption and scaling up of solutions. One in our consultation, in our engagement with our partners at the World Economic Forum, we have learned that partners are very excited about what they are learning, and especially private sector organizations are discovering the power that they have in improving their use of water, in going towards a water positive future. However, we have also learned that the withdrawals, thinking about the system scale, or perhaps more tangibly from the scale of a basin, we learned that by accumulating a number of initial projects and the projects that corporate might execute at an initial stage, we're talking about the 2% to 5% of the overall withdrawals, overall water use in a basin. Is that moving the needle? Is that creating a movement? That's why thinking about the scaling up and creating solutions that others can adopt in a particular basin is something that is an urgency. So in other words, how we can turn that 3% into 30%, so it becomes the norm, so that it's mainstream. That's the second challenge. And the third one, in my perspective, is perhaps an invitation to shape an enabling environment through all the actions we undertake in partnerships. So, in other words, designing partnerships for impact goes beyond our own businesses, beyond the specific objectives of a pilot, of an initiative, of a project, or of a policy. As World Economic Forum, we have always been fascinated, of course, by the economics, the financing aspects of projects, of pilots, of new ideas. But we have also learned that it's always worth reflecting on what is the business case of these ideas and how others can benefit from this business case. When we talk about a solution on water, is this only applicable, for example, to the water utilities industry, or can other usual suspects like food and beverage industry apply and use this business case and, of course, create value for themselves? And perhaps very importantly, when we think about public-private collaboration perspective, is this helpful to create policies? Can our thinking really inform the thinking on policies, and can influence and bring new ideas for policy reform or for policy renewal? So, in other words, perhaps a final thought, ultimately, if sharing, and I'm talking about truly sharing learnings with those that we need our input, especially in the public sector, public servants, and of course, NGOs, this is something that can be very beneficial, because these other sectors are always eager to hear new ideas and institutionalize change. Only through sharing, only through scaling up, and only through developing a systems perspective, we believe that we will be able to move that needle and enable systems transformation. So once again, thank you so much on behalf of the World Economic Forum for this invitation. I look forward to learning from this exciting panel. Kirsten, over to you.
Thank you so much, Braulio. That was really interesting. I think what we're going to do is try and build on that and talk about the water and the energy sector specifically. And so I'm going to pass over to Pete Gray from Arup and Lillian Parks from Northern Ireland Water to talk about the hydrogen and oxygen ecosystem using their demonstration project.
I'll start. So I'm Lillian Parks, a business improvement project manager from Northern Ireland Water, currently working on our hydrogen and oxygen demo project. So as part of the circular water and energy topic, I'll be providing you with some background on the concept of the project, which aims to demonstrate at a higher scale hydrogen and oxygen co-production at the wastewater treatment site. So this should enable future benefits in the wastewater treatment process while working towards net zero challenges under climate change. And then I'll hand over to Pete Gray from Arup, who will provide some more on the partnerships providing the innovative solution. I can have the next slide, please. So NI Water uses around 300 gigawatt hours of electricity a year, with roughly 15 to 20% of this being used by blowers in the wastewater treatment process. So this high energy use, coupled with a lot of wastewater treatment works operating near or beyond their design capacity, provides a challenge when aiming for decarbonisation under climate change action. So a few years ago, through a research project on energy storage solutions, Lag and Miaika considered a solution of using the output of electrolyzers at existing wastewater treatment works to not only provide an energy storage solution, but also to use the oxygen from the electrolyzer in the wastewater treatment process. The benefits of this, as demonstrated in recent trials, included, amongst others, increased treatment capacity and reduced energy consumption through reduced use of blowers. Next slide, please. The concept of the demo project also provides a production of green hydrogen, which is zero emissions fuel, and to supply this to vehicles to decarbonise transport as part of our journey to net zero carbon. This is to be achieved by procuring an electrolyser, which we have done, and that electrolyser is a key piece of equipment that produces hydrogen and what is often considered a byproduct, oxygen. Next slide, please. So the project concept and system design, which has been developed to address these challenges, is shown in this schematic. We have the grid-connected wastewater treatment works. A key component of the project is to deliver and retrofit a 1 megawatt electrolyzer into a wastewater treatment works, which will use electricity at night time to produce green oxygen. So if you click on it again, so the green oxygen then will be injected into the wastewater treatment process, and also, of course, to produce green hydrogen to decarbonise transport via an off-taker. So the design includes the reuse of treated effluent from the wastewater treatment works to supply the electrolyser, which aligns well with circular economy principles. So what does a membrane-free electrolyser look like? It's on the next slide. This photo shows a small-scale 10 kilowatt electrolyser, which was manufactured and then installed at Northern Ireland Water's Kinniger Wastewater Treatment Works in Belfast as part of a pilot research project that was previously completed. So an electrolyser has already been produced and operated on a live wastewater treatment works site, which helped to develop confidence in the project with stakeholders. This was successful in providing very promising results with the oxygen trials, which showed the benefits of oxygen on the wastewater treatment process. And from that proof of concept, it was scaled up to oxygen trials at the demo site, and that those trials indicated the reduced treatment time by 15%, increased specific nitrification rate by 31%, and reduced blower energy consumption by batch by 13%. So I'll just hand over to Pete, which is the next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. So how did we make this happen and deliver this demonstrator project? So working between government departments, the Department for Economy, which has a lead role for energy in Northern Ireland, provided a grant funding of circa £5 million across to Northern Ireland Water. And then Northern Ireland Water, with support from its advisors, Arup, CMS Legal, and EY, procured a strategic partnering agreement, which was procured through an innovation partnership procedure under the Utilities Contract Regs, which was Northern Ireland Water's first use of innovation partnership procedure. The successful contractor, Lillian's mentioned there, Lag and Miaika, and then their supply chain partners included Logan Energy, and also CPH2, who are the electrolyzer manufacturer. So some new supply chain partners to Northern Ireland Water there on the private side. To deliver the 1 megawatt electrolyzer demonstrator project, we needed to carefully think through and prepare a suite of robust contract documents, which came under the strategic partner agreement. So there's a front-end engineering design, EPC for the construction stage, and O&M contracts with breakpoints which were necessary in case there had been any issues around health and safety or feasibility along the way. So Northern Ireland, to protect Northern Ireland Water. The strategic partnering agreement goes a bit further as well. So if all being well, the demonstrator project is successful, it enables NI Water to roll out larger scale, wider projects through this contract. Next slide, please. So why was Belfast Wastewater Treatment Works selected? It's Northern Ireland Water's largest wastewater treatment works. There were a number of factors in this. Firstly, there was a site that was made available. So hydrogen being this being a first of its kind project for Northern Ireland Water, we had to work through the stakeholders on the operations side in NI Water to agree, and they were very good at making available this site. Probably one of the last spaces of green land on the site. It's also important that it had HGV access for so the likes of tube trailers to export the hydrogen, offtake the hydrogen there, potentially even for buses if there was hydrogen buses coming into fuel, that there was space that way. And then, of course, there's a very high power demand for the 1 megawatt electrolyzer. So this site had capacity in the electricity network. And then we worked through with the distribution network operator locally, which is Northern Ireland Electricity, to agree the grid connection. So those are also key factors. Next slide, please. On the stakeholder engagement side, obviously very important on the people side. I've mentioned there already some of the internal stakeholders, which were vital to get them on board. There's other capital upgrades planned at this particular site, so we had to coordinate with those. Click on, please. On the permitting side, this was quite important. So some new areas for NI Water. There was a first pollution prevention control permit for a hydrogen scheme in Northern Ireland, which was approved via the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. There's also, I've mentioned, on the electrical side, and we exercised NI Water's permitted development rights to get approval from Belfast City Council on the planning side. And then lastly, but not leastly, the health and safety side with the HSENI and the Fire and Rescue Service. There's been ongoing discussions from the pilot. So next slide, please. Progress-wise, we're in the construction stage currently. As Lillian mentioned, there's been ongoing trials with this demonstrator with promising results. And we're just waiting for the electrolyzer to be delivered. So those trials have been using tanked oxygen. And then the electrolyzer, all being well, will be delivered later this year and connected up. So that's where we are progress-wise. There's discussions with TransLink as well, another partnership with the local bus and rail company, about they have over 20 hydrogen buses. And so there's that partnership and discussion ongoing between NI Water and TransLink for TransLink to be a potential off-taker. Next slide, please. All being well then, with the success of the demonstrator project, NI Water will go wider where there's capacity issues and there's various NI Water wastewater treatment work sites where electrolyzers could be deployed. Next slide to finish. So just to summarize, there's been strong new partnerships formed between government stakeholders, and there's been a real people coming together and willingness to do something for the planet and for Northern Ireland and work together with this, including mentioned TransLink there and other stakeholders in the permitting. And then they've combined with, next slide please, or next click, then private sector partners that have experience in hydrogen and across various aspects, all partnering towards the goals. I think, Kirsten, that is probably it from Lillian and I.
Yep, perfect. Thanks so much, Pete and Lillian. You kind of spoke about how this is bringing people together to move towards a better planet, and Lena's going to build on this a little bit and talk about how water and carbon are linked and the role of circular water systems in reducing carbon.
Hello, my name is Lena. I work in Polypipe Middle East. I'm in charge of water management solutions in the region, and I'm here, to speak to you about this very exciting and interesting topic, which we always repeat in all our meetings. I'm happy that you have mentioned that we need to look at the overall picture, not only at one solution, and who benefits from that and what do they get from that solution. And we're going to go through that right now. So next slide, please. So Polypipe in general, we provide solutions for climate and water and buildings. So now, before we talk about the solutions, if you can please move to the next slide. So in general, as the total population has increased due to the economic development, it has increased the demand on water and energy, as we all know, which has created challenges to our cities on the environment threats and stress on resources. So this climate change, it has affected our Earth, as we all know. There is global warming, there is shortage in resources, and we have seen that whatever challenges that at one point they were relevant, let's say for desert or small undeveloped cities, it's now growing in other countries. And for example, we can speak about limited water resources, inefficient water use, reduction in groundwater quantity and quality, and industrialization causing, emissions and excessive amounts of CO2 in our atmosphere. Next slide, please. So now, when we combine this climate change with urban environment, we are actually distorting the nature. And I can give you a few examples of that. So, for example, for stormwater, we are removing the natural ground. There is no more space. There's no infiltration. We are creating more runoff and more pollutions as the water is moving above the concrete, and that is actually even speeding up the pollution even at the end of line, which we can again provide solutions for that. Another thing is regarding the CO2 footprint. So the more buildings we have, that means the more transportation, the more buildings, the more emissions we have. So we are actually, as humans, with our activities, we are the one who's creating these problems, and we should be responsible for that. If we move to the next one, please. One more example is the urban heat island effect, with creating more, concrete surfaces. Concrete absorbs the heat during the day and releases at night, which means that the urbanized areas will be warmer than if you go to places where they are more green. The next slide, please. The energy resources we are using. So we are actually relying a lot on burning the fossil fuel. And I have seen this information actually on one of the websites. I think it was in the UN. So I took this slide from their website. So they were talking about the global warming and how does the CO2 contributes to that. But that lead us to a very important conclusion that we need to move away from these approaches and these solutions, what we are doing right now. Can we please move to the next slide? Okay, so one of the things that we were actually talking about even in other meetings about desalination, for example. So desalination to clean the water and make it ready for use is actually contributing big time for a CO2 footprint because of the fossil fuel. So if we look for the future, if you want to shape the future, we need to think outside the box. and find other ways instead of just sticking to what was used hundreds of years over and over. And we have seen the results and the impact of these approaches and these solutions. So we can go through few of the alternatives, but I can explain how we can do that. So if you can please just move to the next slide. Okay, so in general, what we are promoting in the region is challenging the traditions and implementing new technologies and new approaches. And mainly is to focus on, instead of who is paying for this, is what do you achieve from that? And what do you get from that? So we need to change the way we look at things. We also promote the health and safety, the well-being, return on investments. That's very important topic we speak to customers about, and professionals and engineers. We also speak about the performance of the project, not only a product. So we never go and speak about a product specifically. So we need people to understand the difference between the short-term impact and the long-term impact, and how does these solutions benefit in the next 50 years or 100 years. So it will make it like bigger picture. So now if you can please move to the next slide. So one of the important things that happened in the region is that they shifted away from traditional material, which causes CO2 footprint, and mainly I can say concrete, for example, they are reducing it as much as they can. The approach of design has changed for rainwater. So there is implementation for zero discharge, source control, SUDS, and we are focused on what we call the 5 R's, the reuse. I think everybody is familiar with that. So reuse, regenerate, reduce. So all of these concepts now, they are being implemented in the stormwater designs. The next slide, please. So that's another solution, which is to mimic the nature. We are creating green roofs, blue roofs, and what we mean by green and blue roofs, it doesn't mean to be on the roof, but anywhere. But the idea is to reuse the water, any type of water. There is zero energy required, and it can also provide flood mitigation, which reduces the damages on properties. So this is how it actually improves even the energy consumption within the buildings. That's another alternative. Can we please move to the next one? Okay, one thing we started recently to promote, which is wastewater reuse, because we understand the region is trying to move away from desalination. So it's really important to focus now on from where we are collecting the water and what kind of treatment is required. Even if it's costly, we need to look at the cost versus the impact. Even if it's too much to recycle this water and clean it, it's important to compare it to desalination and see which one is more beneficial in the long term. The next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things that is very important, and we keep pushing towards it, is to have LEED and sustainability certification on projects, and which we have seen a big movement in the region recently. It's very important. I don't know why the slide is not moving. Is it just me or everybody? But I can't see it moving. So what we are promoting is not just to allow traditional material, traditional designs, is to make sure that the performance is measured on the long term. The next slide, please. Okay, so there is a perception in general that moving from linear to circular is challenging, and sustainable measures are expensive to put in place, while the cost of not doing anything is actually far greater. So we need to focus on the value, have greater investment for initiatives, and look at the long-term approach, plan in advance, planning what's next, prepare for the next generations, and just to offer, a safe place to live and work in. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Lina. I really liked how you spoke about how kind of certifications can be used to kind of enable people and convince people to implement circular water systems. I think a kind of similar thing that can be used to encourage people to embrace circularity are platforms like the World Green Building Council and cross-sectoral partnerships like this. So what I'll do is I'll hand back over to Dominika, who will talk about cross-sectoral partnerships towards circularity.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Yeah, I like that we've sort of touched on public-private partnerships, we've touched on circularity principles, and so I think the World Green Building Council is a nice place to bring those two things together. So for those that don't know us, the World Green Building Council network is the largest and most influential local, regional, and global action network. And we're accelerating the sustainable and just transition of the built environment in particular. We have over 75 national green building councils and over 60 partners, which together represent about 46,000 industry members. With so many countries involved, our network makes up a significant portion of the global building stock, of GDP, of the built environment emissions, and also of the global urban population. We go to the next slide. And we recognize that we have a significant sustainability challenge on our hands. We see increasing risks from climate change, and we know that the building sector contributes its fair share to this ongoing challenge. We're all likely familiar with some of these statistics here on screen, especially in the building sector, the 37% of energy-related greenhouse gases and 40% of raw material extraction coming from the building sector. But if we go to the next slide, but water will be one of our biggest challenges in the next few years, and this is going to be felt all around the world. So some of the current figures are quite alarming. Half of the population does not have access to safe sanitation services. There's a quarter of the population who does not have access to potable water. And so our sector plays a key role in trying to tackle this challenge. On the one hand, it is estimated that 15% of freshwater use comes from buildings and construction, and that around 10% of global carbon emissions can be attributed to the water sector. And then on the other hand, it is also estimated that there's going to be a gap of about 40% between global water supply and demand. So to raise awareness and guide actions among different stakeholders across the building sector, we recently published the Building a Water Resilient Future for Everyone, Everywhere paper, which you can find on our website. And if we go to the next slide, this is key. Most of the publications that we put out, we really try to focus on working across the entire sector so that the types of guidance in there addresses different stakeholders. So in the publication, you can find an infographic like this one, where we call for action from across the different scales of water use in the built environment. And this is again available for anyone to use, and you can communicate with different stakeholders depending on what part of the value chain they operate in. So this includes, for example, when you're working with a supply chain where water use is used in manufacturing of building materials and products. You see processes such as chemical reactions or cooling, washing, energy production, all of that uses up water in the supply chain part. Then we have the construction processes. You have mixing of concrete, dust control, various equipment operations, landscaping, even worker amenities that all use water in this part of the process. And then, of course, we're all very familiar during the operations of the buildings where we see often the lack of monitoring, or we have inefficient fixtures that are in place. We have inadequate maintenance and just an overall lack of awareness and incentives around sort of water use and water conservation within buildings. And then, of course, at the scale of cities and communities where municipal utilities and services also require fresh water. If we go to the next slide. At the World Green Building Council, we believe that a big part of the solution is looking into the principles of the circular economy, which were already mentioned a few times earlier, where we want to really optimize resources that include natural, financial, and human resources. The Center for the Circular Economy highlights that there's key elements to fostering circularity in construction, such as, for example, innovation in technologies, but also in business models. So we have been seeing, for instance, an exponential growth of the products as a service concept in the past few years, and it's expanding on solutions from initially maybe lighting to even now facades. You can find more information about products as a service if you go to the Circular Buildings Coalition webpage if you want to look into that. They also highlight policies. So circularity is an important pillar of the policies being developed to reach our decarbonization targets. So for instance, within the EU Green Deal, 2 of the 4 pillars are related to circularity. They have the Circular Economy Action Plan and the Renovation Wave. And then, of course, there's partnerships and finance, which are key to scaling up solutions. So in circularity, the close collaboration of different sectors and stakeholders is a requirement, as we saw in some of the infographics earlier. So just to give a brief sort of illustration of this point, I'd like to show a case study that was developed by another partner of ours, WSP. So if we go to the next slide. If we look at the Watershed Smart Building in Seattle, for example, it's just one of the projects that has been able to cover its entire need of non-potable water through its building design measures. But it also is part of the water circular ecosystem of the city. And it has a bioretention plant that filters the runoff water from the adjacent bridge to the building. And this is supporting the management of the city's lakes, both in their capacity and in filtering out harsh toxins. And this building, but also its results are only really possible through the active collaboration between designers, developers, city authorities, but also the building users. And it really results in a win-win for the entire building community. If you want to dive deeper into this building, we did a webinar in April. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can find it there and learn a little bit more details about that. If we go to the next slide. And these types of cases are leading to more holistic solutions towards the end goal of having decarbonized and resilient cities. We can see, for instance, cities as diverse as Shanghai, New York, and Cardiff are all embracing the concept of sponge cities, where the combination of sustainable urban drainage systems with inner city gardens and increasing green area in general is improving not only the air and the life quality for the inhabitants, but also their resilience for future climate considerations and for freshwater availability. If you go to the next slide. So with World GBC and how we're structured, we really are looking at supercharging the ambition loop. And we are looking forward to working with our network on having really impactful outcomes in this space. So in the next few years, we're trying to work with the network to achieve the 2030 climate goals, specifically through the co-creation of national decarbonization and resilience roadmaps, through fostering improved standards and codes, and by amplifying local, regional, and global advocacy efforts. And all of this is in collaboration with our member green building councils, all of their industry partners and government. If you go to the next slide. We also foster knowledge sharing, and that's why if you look on our website, you can access any of these resources. They're available for everyone. Last year, we released the Circular Built Environment Playbook, the 5th edition of our Advancing Net Zero Status Report. We also have the Building a Water Resilient Future paper, which I mentioned earlier, and the social impact across the built environment. And as I mentioned, many of these are really targeted to the different stakeholders engaged. So you can find something for everyone in those resources. Next slide. And then finally, I would just love to invite all of you, if you're not already part of the network, please come and talk to us, come and join us. You can also be part of our annual campaigns that include World Green Building Week that takes place in September every year, as well as our Building to COP campaign, where we partner with various stakeholders in making sure that we advocate strongly for the solutions in the built environment and how they can help us achieve some of the goals that are being negotiated at the COP conferences. So next slide. I think I'll pause there so we can have lots of time for more discussion. Thanks, Kirsten.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll move into our panel discussion next. So just to call out to anyone that's in the meeting, if you want to put any questions in the chat, we'll try and pick them up throughout the panel discussion. So we have all of our speakers back to kind of discuss links between sectors, circular water systems. And I think I'm going to start with Pete, if possible. So Pete, what would you say has historically divided the energy and the water sector, and how can we unlock circular water opportunities by bringing those two sectors together?
Good question. Speaking from my experience, maybe energy and water have been sort of quite siloed. Thinking, just we were given the example there of the hydrogen project and what are working on, as with there's so much change ongoing and the hydrogen economy growing. I know there's been a bit of debate, and a key consideration is sort of water supply for the hydrogen economy, and with electrolyzers and technologies to produce the hydrogen using the water supply. With the massive upscale in production of hydrogen, how's there going to be that water supply there, as an example? We're exploring the reuse of treated effluent as a water supply rather than using potable mains water, because as has been touched on there by Dominica, the supply of water is a key issue, and it's going to get more and more scarce as a resource. So there isn't going to be that abundant supply of water for the hydrogen economy. So I think more than ever now, the energy and water sectors need to work more closely together, where traditionally there maybe have obviously needed to be some link up there, but hasn't been maybe thought about as much, and with all the renewables plans towards net zero. There's also, like, for example, Northern Ireland Water I think they're maybe the third largest landowner in Northern Ireland. So as a water utility company, they have those land assets that could be very valuable for renewables. And I know Lillian and the team there are looking into renewables plans, and then that needs that link up with the energy sector and supply connection, and needs all to be sort of strategically planned out.
Yeah, awesome. I think what we'll do is kind of build on that maybe. So they've obviously been quite siloed industries, and you're saying they're starting to come together. And I'll kind of direct this question at Dom. Have you seen people being interested in collaborating within your membership, and that they understand how organizations like the World Green Building Council can help bring people together and create these kind of cross-sectoral partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the projects that we design at World GBC are aimed at that kind of cross-sectoral partnership opportunities. So we're always looking and working through our members to bring all the different players to the table. A couple I mentioned earlier, the initiative to have national roadmaps for decarbonization and resilience. And initially, for a long time, we talked about just decarbonization roadmaps, and we've really expanded to make sure we're including resilience so that we make room for important topics such as water, which tend to be associated a little bit more with that resilience component. And what we're seeing there is that the most effective ways to put these roadmaps in place is when you are partnering across government, but also bringing the different sectors, so that the solutions that they propose have sort of thought of the different scales of how things work and how you can scale them across to different cities, different countries even. So many of our programs, we have a green building council that will be bringing their sectors together on the national level and developing some of these solutions. And then they're also collaborating with another green building council, another country, to compare what kind of successes and challenges can they learn from. And even in that example, we published an analysis report just comparing about 15 different country roadmaps to show like where's their different priorities and what different partners are coming to the table. What are the successes? And time again, the more diverse the collaboration of that project, the better the outcome, the more likely that there's going to be implementation, because it's of course not just about designing a plan, but it's about making sure that it's implementable and scalable.
Awesome. I really liked how you spoke about kind of government level and then bringing that together with the kind of private sector. We've got Lillian with us, who's from Northern Ireland Water, which is a government-owned company. And so Lillian, I was wondering if you've got any insight on how partnering between the public sector and the private sector can be used to kind of unlock the business cases for these circular water systems where sometimes there's not kind of obvious funding streams.
I think just from the experience of building up the partnerships with this hydrogen auction demonstrator project, it's made me really fully aware of looking at the different aspects. Everyone has different experiences across the board, like the Dominica was saying there. So having those different aspects, looking at the challenges, proposed solutions, but you're getting all those different aspects. So you've got a better picture, basically. So that really helps, gives you a better informed business case. So you don't want a business case with a hole in it at the end of the day. And yeah, so I think the knowledge sharing and the lessons learned are important, but to have everybody as much as you can at the table, just so that you're not missing on something that could be done at the same time as moving forward. Obviously, time is a resource that is very valuable too. So it's just keeping it as, if you have those open communications already there, those forums there, then you're on to a winner, I think.
Great, thank you so much. I think what I'll do is one of the questions from the audience kind of builds on this a little bit, and I'll switch over to Lena. You're in a kind of unique position where you're both part of one of these big cross-sectoral partnerships through the Emirates Green Building Council, but you're also in the private sector as part of the Polypipe Middle East. So one of the questions from the audience is, how have you navigated identifying cross-sectoral actors and relationships to build beyond the context of an individual project? So not just looking at one, but creating a partnership that's long-lasting. Have you had any experience with that, or be able to share any insights?
Yeah, I can, of course. Yeah, we have done a lot. I've been in this field over around more than 10 years now, and we have worked hard on finding a way to develop it and find partners and find R&D places where we can work even with other organizations. The doors are open. I can't say it's not open, but there is always a challenge of who's taking the responsibility. That's the first thing. And the second thing, there is always the fear of failure, which should be open. Yes, we did navigate that. We are working on a lot of pilot projects in the region. And one of the solutions I have shared is the passive irrigation, and which has worked very well in other parts of the world. But once we mention it here, it's like, oh, no, it's not going to work. Yeah, that's the first response you get before we even do anything. And this is the main challenge we have, plus the financing. I have been through a long journey with this area, and I can see a movement. I can see the need. I can see the changes. It is moving forward, but a bit slow, which comes to our point where we were saying we need to push it faster, because the time element, which you just mentioned now, Lillian, is very important. We say we have targets on certain years, we need to achieve certain goals, but at the same time, we have a lot of blockers and a lot of things that are causing these delays. And one of the important things that we want to highlight is we want to partner even with, yes, we have a membership, let's say, with Emirates Green Building Council. But one of the ideas we discussed is, why don't we do something together? And actually, we have seen that they are trying to do that right now. which is amazing. They put all those innovative technologies together. They want to see how can they put them together, and build them in one place and see the impact. So we are actually working on it. We have done few projects in the region, and there was a positive feedback. But as I said, it's difficult when you have a lot of fear of who is going to lead this and what if it fails. Yeah, that's the only challenge we have, to be honest with you. But other than that, I can see the change. It's a bit slow. There is a need, especially when the stress on the infrastructure and the utilities is increasing, especially when you have these big developments happening. We can't just keep, expanding and expanding these utilities. We need to find alternatives. It's a lot of responsibility and money. So there is a change. That's the only thing I can say. Yes, there is a change happening.
I think, yeah, so we kind of, super interesting. And I'm going to switch quickly just to the chat. We've had one more question in, and I'm going to slightly change it and put Pete on the spot slightly, and ask him how he thinks we can get eyes onto the water crisis, but also onto all of the opportunities that the water sector is searching for and is ready to unlock.
I think eyes onto it. I think it's massive, the people element and people understanding the challenges we have. I don't think don't want to offend anyone, so I think like UK, Northern Ireland, I think the public don't necessarily understand those challenges very well. I know we've our own particular challenges in Northern Ireland. There aren't domestic water charges, so people aren't paying that in their bills, which there's quite high per person, per head of capita demand on water liters per day. So compare that to, I was lucky to be in Singapore earlier this year, and you speak to the taxi driver and he understands about the water needs and their supply from Malaysia and what a precious resource it is. And there's good, I think, communication around that. There's a nice museum it was all about the water cycle, how important it is, even water meters. And so I think the knowledge of the people and the public is really, really important, and understanding the value of water. And I definitely think there's work to do here. And then that all then supports the necessary investment there is to secure both water resources, but also to ensure there's investment in sewerage, drainage, to facilitate development and connections.
Thanks, Pete. You spoke a bit about kind of knowledge sharing and making sure that people are engaged in this. Dom, you work for the World Green Building Council, obviously, and you're all about engagement. How do you see the World Green Building Council being able to share kind of lessons learned? So not just sharing, success stories, but also failures in the industry and what we can learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part of our contribution here is that when we have this network of green building councils who they're a community and they know each other. And so this creates a space where they feel a bit more open to sharing some of the challenges and what we really need to tackle. So I think that's a big part of it. And those are relationships that they have with industry stakeholders. It's the same thing. What's been really nice is just watching, various kind of competitors come to the table where traditionally they wouldn't want to talk about some of the challenges and some of the mistakes. And our network really tries to encourage that, because we know that that's what you're going to learn the most from. So this kind of model that they have in place of bringing everyone to the table, despite whether you're competing or not, despite whether you're in the same industry or not, is really kind of helping to unlock some of those learning opportunities. Yeah.
Great. We don't have any more questions in the chat, so I think what we'll do is we'll move to our kind of closing remarks. So that's from myself representing Arup and from Dominica representing the World Green Building Council. So I'll make a start. I think what really struck me especially at the very start of the session is when Braulio kind of opened and spoke about creating business cases and making sure that there's investment in circular water systems, and change isn't going to happen overnight, and we need to be setting up all of those stepping stones to get towards a circular water future. So a small plug, Arup and the World Green Building Council have kind of jointly created a fact sheet available on the World Green Building Council website around how people working in the built environment can unlock that business case for circular water systems. So please feel free to check that out if you're interested in kind of learning further about this topic. But I think the kind of key theme that's run through all of these talks is that decarbonisation is difficult. Circular water systems do offer an opportunity to reduce our carbon, work towards net zero, and also bring together sectors that historically haven't necessarily spoken to each other, and kind of increase that engagement across sectors. And in order to get there, we really need to be working at every scale of the built environment, as Dom talked about, trying to make sure that we get all of the co-benefits that can come from circular water systems, looking at nutrients and water and wastewater and kind of every opportunity there is to extract something from water, but also ensure that the water we're returning to the environment still has those nutrients. And the key thing is that we need to bring people together. So not just sectors, but also individual people, and make sure that we're working towards a kind of circular future, where we're not just using and abusing the water that we have, and we're taking every possible opportunity to recycle it and reuse it, and stop extracting unsustainably from the environment. I'll pass to Dom for the final thoughts on your end.
Thank you, Kirsten. I think in addition to all of those things, a key thing that stood out for me was this idea of scales, and that I think as soon as we start to play around with the scale of the work that we're doing, that's where we move out of our silos. Because if we're looking at an individual building level, we're sort of putting all the pieces together, but we can still sort of manage just within the group that we're traditionally working with. But as soon as we start to move to a community level, where we're engaging with different sectors, we need to be collaborating in a different way. We need to be bringing different stakeholders to the table. So I think I would encourage everyone, whatever project that you're working on, think about sort of what's the next scale up for what I'm doing, and who would I need to work with and partner with to be able to move to that scale of impact of delivering resilient water systems. So that was a big additional piece that really stood out for me. Yeah.
Great. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you to all of our speakers for doing such an excellent job. And thank you to everyone that's dialed in to listen to this. And have a great, rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.